So let me start by saying a massive thank you to everyone who's come today and taken time out of what I know is a really busy schedule to learn a little bit more about body positivity. It's a topic that's really close to my heart because it was a large, discovering the movement was a large part of what triggered me to recover from my eating disorder and helped me to recover from my eating disorder. And I hope to be able to share with you all a little bit about the movement and why it's so vital and important. So I want to start off with a quick discussion. What does body positivity mean to you? When you hear those words, what do you think of? Normalizing all, in capital, bodies, to be happy or comfortable with yourself and how you look. For me personally, it means acceptance, not worrying what others think about what your body is like, challenging how society views the body, that there is value in your body even if you don't fit the norm, considering your health rather than your looks, feeling beautiful when you take care of your health. Yeah, so there's lots of different themes that have come through there. In particular, I like the themes of respect and celebration and normalizing. And I think that body positivity can mean a lot of different things, and we'll explore exactly what those are throughout this presentation. But on most of the slides, I have included some artwork from a range of my favourite body positive focused artists. So I just want to give a shout out to this series, which is called A Fact Take on Matisse by Eliza Valenti, and I just love the colours and the fluidity and the way that the body ripples. They make me feel happy looking at these images. So what is body positivity? At its heart, it's a social movement that advocates for the acceptance of all bodies, regardless of size, physical ability, health, gender, race, or appearance. And it's based on the belief that size, like race, gender, sexuality, and disability, forms part of a power hierarchy, with some bodies experiencing a societal level of oppression. And a shout out to the artwork on this slide is by the incredible queer and non-binary photographer called Shug McDaniel. And their work focuses a lot on photographing a diverse range of bodies underwater, and they call them fat mermaids in their artwork. And for me, they just create this otherworldly, ethereal beauty. And they were one of the first artists that I discovered that really portrayed larger bodies in this unique and beautiful, positive, empowering way. And it just blew my mind the first time I saw their work. So I would definitely recommend checking them out on Instagram. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the body positive movement. So in the 1960s, the civil rights movements were exploding, and fat acceptance and fat right movements formed part of that. So there was the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, which was set up by Bill Fabry, who was upset at the way the world was treating his wife, Janice. And there was also the Fat Underground, which was launched by a group of fat Californian feminists who launched their Fat Liberation Manifesto. Throughout this slide in particular, you'll hear me referring to fat people, and I think that can sometimes be a bit jarring if you're new to body positivity, but the terminology is used by these people to describe themselves, and it's kind of reclaiming the word fat and taking it away from being used as an insult to just what it is. Fat is an adipose tissue that sits underneath our skin, and it can also be a descriptor of a body shape. It doesn't have to have any emotional value judgment attached to it. So the Fat Liberation Manifesto set out some key points, which were: we believe that fat people are fully entitled to human respect and recognition. We are angry at commercial and sexist industries that position fat bodies as a source of ridicule and make money by selling a false promise of avoiding this ridicule. We demand equal rights for fat people in all aspects of life: employment, education, public facilities, and health services. I wanted to make a special note on this comment that body size is still not recognised as a protected characteristic in UK employment law, which I think it should be. and that's one of the reasons why you'll see all policies at PensionBee refer to body size, because we wish to protect it in that manner. We single out reducing industries as our enemies and demand they take responsibility for their false claims and proven harmfulness. We believe that science falsely unclaims that we are unfit. We refuse to be subordinate. We reclaim full power over our bodies, and they finished by making a call to arms of fat people of the world unite. So that was the movement across the 60s and 70s, and then everything went a little bit quiet, I guess. There was a big explosion of the fitness movement in the 80s and 90s. But since around 2012, we've started to see a resurgence in the body positive movement with the rise of social media. And that has been both a blessing and a curse. So it spread the word and brought people like myself to the movement and helped me in endless ways. And I'm sure it's helped others too. But it's also become quite problematic because the movement has become overly commercial. If you search #bodypositive on Instagram, you'll see a lot of non-body positive content. So it's really important whenever we talk about body positivity to remember where the movement started, who it's serving, and make sure we always amplify the most marginalized voices within the movement. So next up, I want to give a quick content note. So for the next 3 slides and approximately 8 to 10 minutes, I'm going to be discussing health and disability stigma, fat phobia, dieting, weight loss in the media, and the racial origins of fat phobia. But before we get onto that, a quick shout out to one of my absolute favorite artists of all time, Shona McAndrew, who creates beautiful paintings and sculptures that find beauty in everyday moments and a diverse range of bodies. So let's hold this wonderful image in our minds as we go into some not very pleasant content. So what about health? Too often when we start a conversation about fat acceptance or body positivity, someone will raise the question of what about health? And it often feels like a loaded question that asks people with larger bodies to change or to be invisible. So I'm going to address some of the key points on the topic of health on this slide, but I won't be taking questions now or at the end. And the reason I'm not taking questions on this topic is because I think it's completely irrelevant to whether all bodies, regardless of their size, are worthy of acceptance and respect. And that's what I want this presentation to focus on, is the fact that everyone deserves respect. So the first point to mention on this is that size and health are not always linked. So some studies show that once you account for having a varied diet, moderate exercise, not smoking or drinking, then body weight doesn't correlate to your health outcomes. Also on this point, there are plenty of people in smaller bodies who are unhealthy, who are not subject to the same questions on their health status. The second point is that dieting doesn't work. So tolerance for difference, I think, seems to diminish when we believe that something is a choice. And research shows that a lot of people feel fatness is a choice that's caused by laziness and gluttony. But the truth is that 95% of weight loss attempts and diets fail, and people go on to regain the weight plus more within 5 years. I also really want to stress the point on this that diets are dangerous. They're the biggest single predictor of developing an eating disorder, and eating disorders are the mental health issue with the highest mortality rate. So the fact that our society is completely obsessed with promoting dieting, in my view, is completely immoral, and I wish it would go away. The third point is that stigma and shame are also detrimental to health. So if we really cared about people's health, we would care about this too. So stigma and shame have a negative effect, not just on our mental health, but also our physical health. People in larger bodies face discrimination in lots of different ways. So inaccessible seating, inaccessible mainstream clothing, abusive comments in the street or on social media for no other fact than purely existing in their bodies. They also face poorer standards of healthcare from doctors. You're more likely to be given the advice to lose weight for any health issue and not receive an adequate investigation into what the cause could be or medication. And it's behaviour like that from doctors which stops people from seeking help and then further increases the negative health outcomes. It's also important to mention that anxiety and stress increase blood pressure and have an impact on physical health. And in my opinion, I just feel that very little positive change comes from a place of fear and shame. We take better care of ourselves when we feel worthy and accepted. So instead of this constant focusing of the message on weight loss and fat as something that's diseased and should be removed, how much more powerful could it be if we focus the message on nourishing our bodies, moving our bodies and loving our bodies, focusing on what we can add in and how we feel, not on what we can take away and numbers on a scale. But the final point for me is by far the most important and the one that I hope everyone takes away today. Everyone is worthy regardless of their health. We live in a capitalist society that I think often overemphasizes our worth based on our capital and what we can produce for society. And in turn, that creates disability and ill health are often then stigmatized and marginalized from society. And we're desperately missing some empathy and some emotion from this equation. The question of whether or not a body is healthy is completely and utterly irrelevant to whether that body deserves to be treated with respect. All bodies are worthy. All bodies deserve to celebrate their existence in the world. And that's final, in my view. If your body positivity has a size limit, it's not body positivity. So next up, what is it? Oh, I forgot to mention this glorious artwork. So this is by the photographer Anthony Patrick Manieri, and his series is called Arrested Movement. It focuses on male body positivity and showcases a diverse range of bodies moving in beautiful, elegant ways at all sizes and abilities. So what is it exactly that we're fighting against? How is fatness currently portrayed? I just want to give a content note that I am going to show images here of content which I think is offensive. So if you feel that is not what you'd like to see, then please feel free to close your laptop and come back in a couple of minutes. So first of all, fatness in the media. We often see fatness portrayed as diseased. I think we've all seen these headless bodies on the news. It makes me so angry to see people represented in this way. I think before I discovered body positivity, this was almost the only way that I had seen larger bodies portrayed. It's completely dehumanizing. It doesn't focus on any other aspects of the person or their experience. It's humiliating and it's wrong. We often see these images also posted under sensationalist headlines talking about how much obesity is costing us, the obesity crisis, how it's an NHS burden. The entire narrative is around fatness as diseased and wrong, and it removes the human from the equation. We also see fatness positioned as something that's completely unacceptable. So celebrity magazines focus very heavily on dieting and shaming and weight gain. When I was growing up, there was a magazine called Heat that had the circle of shame. They literally called it the shame circle, and they would put a big red mark around celebrities' bodies on anything that they deemed that you should be ashamed of, which usually consisted of fat rolls and the occasional long toenail. There's also shows like The Biggest Loser, which focus on very drastic and unhealthy ways of losing weight, extreme diets, extreme exercise. Not even children were safe from these TV shows. There was one called I Know What You Weighed last summer, where children were sent to fat camp. We also see fatness portrayed as a joke. So this is the film Shallow Hal, where the entire concept is that it's hilarious that a man falls in love with a woman who he doesn't realize is fat. There's The Nutty Professor, again, Eddie Murphy in a fat suit. More or less anything in a fat suit, in my opinion, is offensive. We see fatness portrayed as a villain, so starting from young in children's films, Disney and other cartoons, the protagonist is almost always slim and the villain is very often fat. We have Dudley from Harry Potter, Augustus Gloop from Matilda. From a very young age, we're taught to fear, loathe and mock fatness. We also see fatness positioned as unlovable. So in Monica, Monica from Friends, thin Monica is often portrayed as attractive and lovable, whereas fat Monica is portrayed as lonely and eating and somewhat of a joke. And in general, we just have a massive lack of representation of diverse bodies on television, rom-coms, Hollywood, TV. It's often focusing on white, thin, cis, straight, able-bodied centric beauty standards and protagonists. And there are so many bodies that are missing from these shows and therefore being perceived as less desirable or less lovable. So for me, I feel when I look back on all of this, I think there are signs that things are changing, but there's still a lot of this portrayal out there. But when I think back of my teenage years, I just feel completely heartbroken and angry and almost amazed that not more people end up developing eating disorders. I had diary entries where I would cut out things from the circle of shame and say that I could never look this way. And it just, I think all of this messaging contributed to a feeling that being fat was one of the worst things that you could be. And to me now, that just feels so wrong. So next up, I wanted to talk a bit about the racial origins of fatphobia. So fatness isn't something that's always been shamed. In fact, Rubenesque was previously the favoured figure. This is the painting, The Landing of Maria de Medici at Marseille, which was painted in 1600. There's also this incredible book, which I haven't had the chance to read yet, but I've read incredible things about it, that argues that there are racial origins to fatphobia. So fatness hasn't always been shamed. In fact, at one point it was the idealized body type, but things started to change towards the end of the slave trade and with the rise of Protestantism in Europe and the USA. So the culture started to idealize puritanical ideals of being rational, self-controlled and self-disciplined, and fatphobia and thin supremacy served the dual purposes of disciplining white women into obedience through body ideals and dieting, and demonizing Black people, women in particular, as immoral and overly indulgent. And that was in an attempt to keep the differentiation and power after slavery. So the woman on the cover of this book is Sarah Bartman, who was exhibited and exploited as part of freak show attractions in the 1800s. So we can see that over time, fatphobia has become another way to demonize and control based on race, class, and gender. And this preoccupation with weight and appearance and dieting serves to control us and focus our energy and money into buying products with false promises. The weight loss and beauty industries are multi-billion-dollar economies that profit off of our insecurities and our oppression. So in a world that's constantly trying to oppress us and shame us, self-acceptance is a radical and revolutionary act, which when you really let that sink in, I just love the concept of that. And that comes from Sonia Renee Taylor, who I would 100% recommend checking out on Instagram. And also she has written a book, which I haven't had the chance to read yet, but it is on my list as well. So after all of that heavy content, let's have some more beautiful brain bleach from Shona McAndrew and these wonderful paintings. I love, I don't know, they just make me feel calm. I really enjoy looking at things like this. So I think that we can all agree, I hope, that something has got to change. So 50% of 13-year-old girls reported being unhappy with their body, and that grew to 80% by the age of 17. And as I said, research is now starting to show that these body image issues are starting as young as 3, and they only get worse with time. By the time we get to womanhood, we have 97% of women in a Glamour survey reporting at least one "I hate my body" moment every day, and the average was 13, which is almost 1 per waking hour. That's a lot of time to be spending hating ourselves. It's not just women that are affected. 35% of men in this research said that they would trade a whole year of their life just to have the ideal body. And it's having a really big impact on our mental health as well. So over 1/3 of UK adults have reported feeling anxious or depressed about their body image, and a further 1 in 8 have experienced suicidal thoughts in relation to their body image. And when we let that sink in, we realise just how much we have to do something about this. And this is the beautiful artwork of Hester Finch, who makes the most incredible nudes with their heads on fire that for me really capture a mood of how I feel sometimes. So what can we do to change things? I think that we're in a really unique position now with the internet and social media, where we can actually create our own reality and have power over what we see and don't see. So the number one thing that I would recommend doing immediately is curating your social media. Unfollow anyone or any account that deflates you or makes you feel bad about yourself, and follow accounts that inspire you. This is the glorious Lizzo, who is just, well, she needs no further mention. Just go check her out and check out her music while you're at it as well. Whilst you're doing that, I would also recommend making sure you seek out and follow the most marginalised voices within the movement. So I have just a very small selection here of the many, many incredible voices out there. There's Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote The Body Is Not an Apology, about the power of radical self-love and self-acceptance. Feeding of the Fox, who talks very openly about disability and the marginalisation that comes with that. The Fact Sex Therapist, who's incredibly political. I've learned so much from following them over the years. We have Leah Vernon, who is a self-proclaimed fat Black Muslim woman who has the most incredible fashion sense. I love following her. It fills me with joy every time I see one of her outfits. I also have some recommendations of books. Again, I'm not even scratching the surface of what's out there. So this is the book that I first discovered in my journey into body positivity, Body Positive Power by Megan Jane Crabb. She had anorexia as a teenager, and she now is a powerhouse and fully recovered. She was the first person that made me think that full recovery is possible, and I now feel I feel like I am now in a position of full recovery. I'm still in therapy, but the difficulties I have very rarely focus on food or my body now, and I just never thought that that was possible. I couldn't see a way out at times, and this book was the first thing that gave me a glimmer of a new life, a new way of doing things. There's also Happy Fat by the incredible comedian Sophie Hagen, well worth a read, and The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. I'd recommend checking out some body positive TV shows. It wasn't until I started watching some of these that I just thought, oh my gosh, I've never seen a protagonist in a larger body where the fact they're in a larger body isn't relevant to the plot line, and they're still the love interest and the main person, not the best friend, and it's powerful when you see it. So I would recommend checking out Shrill, also Dietland, but a warning about Dietland, it does contain some difficult content, so go easy and check out those warnings before you proceed. I'd also recommend going to some body positive events. This is Body Love Sketch Club, which is where everyone gets naked to a level that they're comfortable with and draws each other. It's great fun. And it was through going to things like that that I discovered actually the things I criticised most about my body were the parts I enjoyed drawing most in my body and in other people. There's the Anti-Diet Riot Club run by Becky. She puts on a whole host of different talks and events. I think that there's so much messaging out there. We still are living in a fatphobic, diet-centric culture. So finding like-minded people and safe bubbles to explore this new world in, I would highly recommend it. There's also a lot of body positive Facebook groups out there. You could start a book club. If anyone doesn't know where to start, hit me up. I'm always happy to talk about this topic. And finally, really important to start educating others. So Call out fatphobic comments and ableist comments. Think about accessibility whenever you're putting anything on. And finally, and really importantly, it can be hard when we're in the depths of struggling with our body image to recognise the impact our actions and our words have on others. So as much as you can, just try to be mindful how you talk about your body in front of other people. And finally, just a few tips on making peace with your body. I do want to say, before we go into this, this is one slide that lays these things out in bullet points as though they're something that should be really easily achievable. When I first started therapy, I was like, oh, I'm just going to be here for 10 weeks. That sounds about right. I've been for 3 years. It takes a really long time to unpack a lifetime of conditioning, and especially when we're still living in a world that so heavily focuses on this. So the first one is body neutrality and radical self-love. So you don't have to love your body. In fact, that might be too much to ask of yourself early on into the process. So it can be easier to focus instead on body neutrality, which is the idea that you're worthy as you are. Your body is just a vessel that helps you navigate the world. And in this world that's constantly trying to change us, just being is a radical act. Just being with who you are is a radical act. The next one is intuitive eating and movement. This is another one that I could do a whole nother talk on, and is the way that I focus on eating now after my recovery. So it is about getting rid of diet mentality and grouping of foods into good or bad, or placing any moral judgment on food. All food is equal, and you focus instead on just doing what feels good for your body, and recognizing the fact that it's okay to eat food for pleasure or comfort as well as for nourishment, and move in a way that feels good for your body, and recognize that sometimes that's going to mean resting and not moving at all. The third one is stop waiting and start living. How many of us are waiting until we're thinner to wear a new piece of clothing, or explore a different style, or go on holiday? Life is passing us by while we sit here waiting for a different body. I know I had a lot of hang-ups like this. Like, I love vintage clothes, but for some reason I thought that I could only wear vintage clothes when my body looked the way I wanted it to. But that's gone now. Now I just dress in colour and vintage as much as I possibly can. The next one is notice your internal monologue. So write down your thoughts. Where do they come from? So often those thoughts won't be your thoughts. You'll have picked them up from somewhere else. And think about, would you say this to a friend? You know, now when I notice myself starting to attack my body, I take a deep breath and say what I'm saying in my head out loud. And as soon as it's out loud, I realize how hurtful and how painful some of those words are. And the final one is not accessible to everyone as much as I wish it was, but therapy. I think that fat isn't a feeling, it's an adipose tissue that sits underneath our skin. But so often when we have those feelings, it's about something else, something deeper. And therapy can really help to explore and unpack that and get to what's at the root of the issue. But the most important message from all of this is our bodies don't need to change, society does. And this is some incredible artwork from Blues Chicken, who creates these gorgeous illustrations of a diverse range of body types in an erotic and sensual way. I would definitely recommend checking them out on Instagram, and I would definitely recommend not doing that whilst on a work computer. Okay, well, that's everything from me. On this final slide is just a final artist to call out, which is Tariq Carroll, who's the founder of the Everyman Project, which is starting a visual conversation about diversity.